It was early 1956. A young man from Memphis was about to become the most famous person in the world. He just didn't know it yet. His manager, a man who called himself the Colonel, thought he knew everything. He was a showman, a carnival barker who had stumbled upon the greatest act on earth. He knew how to sell. He knew how to package a product, and to him, his client was a product. A very valuable one. This is why he had a problem, a big one. It was about a song. The very first song his boy was set to release on his new big-time label RCA Victor. The Colonel heard it, and his blood ran cold. He thought it was a disaster. A career-ending, money-losing, reputation-destroying mistake. He believed with every fiber of his being that this one song could kill the whole thing before it even got started. To understand his fear, you have to understand what he thought he was selling. The Colonel had seen this kid on stage. He saw the energy, the swagger, the way he shook his leg, and the girl screamed. He was selling rebellion, but a safe kind of rebellion. He was selling excitement. He was selling rock and roll. The music he had made so far fit that image perfectly. It was fast. It was fun. It was a blend of country and blues that was raw and alive. Songs about good rocking, about being alright, about blue moons. It was music for dancing in jukebox joints and driving too fast on a Saturday night. It was teenage energy bottled up and put on a 45 RPM record. The Colonel's plan was simple. Take that formula, polish it up just a little for the national stage, and sell millions. He had just negotiated a massive deal to get his client away from the Small Sun Records in Memphis. He got him signed to RCA, one of the biggest labels in the country. They paid a fortune, an unheard of amount of money for a new artist. The pressure was on. The first single had to be a monster hit. It had to prove to the New York executives that their gamble on this Southern boy was smart. It had to be a sure thing. And then this song landed in his lap. He listened. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't the product he was selling. It wasn't even close. His first problem was the sound. It was slow. It wasn't just slow. It was a crawl. A funeral march. You couldn't dance to it. You couldn't tap your foot to it. It just plodded along, heavy and grim. The music that made his client famous was all about the beat, the rhythm, the fire. This had none of that. It felt empty. The instrumentation was sparse. Just a simple bass line walking up and down, a lonely sounding piano, and a guitar that sounded like it was crying in the distance. Then there was the production. It was drenched in echo, not the warm slapback echo of his early hits. This was different. It was a cavernous echo. It made the whole thing sound like it was recorded at the bottom of a well. It was spooky. It was unsettling. The Colonel was used to records that sounded clean and bright. Pop music was supposed to be friendly to the ear. This sounded like a transmission from a haunted house. He probably thought the engineers had made a terrible mistake. Why would anyone want a record that sounded so strange and distant? It lacked the punch and immediacy of a hit, but the sound was only the beginning of his worries. The real horror for the Colonel was the story the song told. The lyrics were unlike anything on the radio. Pop music in the 1950s was about holding hands, falling in love, pretty girls, and fast cars. It was optimistic. It was cheerful. This song was the exact opposite. It was about a place. A fictional place at the end of a lonely street. It was a dark, depressing place where broken-hearted lovers went to die. The imagery was bleak. The bellhop's tears, the desk clerk dressed in black, the gloomy room. It was a song about total, crushing despair. It wasn't just sad. It was morbid. One of the writers was inspired by a newspaper story about a man who had killed himself, leaving behind a note that said, "I walk a lonely street." The Colonel was being asked to sell a suicide note set to music. Who would buy this? Teenagers wanted to have fun. They wanted to forget their troubles. They didn't want to listen to a song about a hotel full of miserable people. It was a downer, a dirge. In the Colonel's mind, music was an escape. This song was a trap. It forced you to confront feelings of loneliness and grief. That wasn't a formula for a hit record. It was a formula for clearing a room. He imagined kids hearing it on the radio and immediately changing the station to something, anything, more cheerful. He could already hear the cash registers falling silent. This was all tied to his biggest fear of all the first impression. This was not just any single. It was the debut single on RCA. It was the world's introduction to this artist as a major league player. It had to define him. It had to be a statement of intent. The Colonel wanted that statement to be here as the fun-loving, hip-shaking king of rock and roll. This song made a completely different statement. It said, here is a strange, moody artist who sings sad, weird songs. If this song failed, and the Colonel was certain it would, the consequences would be catastrophic. The executives at RCA would think they'd been had. They would think the Colonel had sold them a damaged product. The press would call him a one-hit wonder from the sticks. The public would be confused. His momentum would die. The whole grand plan would fall apart before it even began. All that money, all that hype, would be wasted on a gloomy song that nobody wanted to hear. It was just too big of a risk. You don't launch a rocket ship with a firecracker. You use a guaranteed, powerful engine. This song felt like it was filled with water instead of fuel. There was another thing that bothered him: the people who wrote it. The music industry, even back then, had its system. There were professional songwriters, guys in offices in New York or Nashville who knew how to craft a hit. They knew the formulas. They knew what worked. This song was written by a high school teacher who worked as a part-time music promoter and a steel guitar player. They weren't part of the hit-making machine. To the Colonel, a man who believed in systems and professionals, this was another red flag. It felt amateur, unproven. He wanted a song from a trusted source, not something cooked up by outsiders. So the Colonel put his foot down. He told his client, he told the record producers, he told anyone who would listen. This was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. He called the song depressing. He called it weird. He said it didn't sound like his boy at all. It's a suicide song, he might have complained. People don't want to hear about a place where they're sad. He fought against its release. He pleaded for them to choose something else, something more upbeat, something safer, something that sounded like the star he was trying to create. But there was one person the Colonel couldn't completely control. Not yet, anyway. And that was the artist himself. The young man from Memphis had heard the demo, and he felt something the Colonel couldn't feel. He didn't hear a commercial mistake. He heard something real. He heard the blues. He heard the gospel music he grew up with. He heard raw, unfiltered emotion. That emptiness in the recording, that spooky echo, that lonely piano, it all spoke to him. It was different, and he knew it. He loved it because it was different. He understood the darkness. He knew about loneliness. This wasn't just a song to him, it was a performance. It was a mood he could inhabit, he insisted. Against the advice of his manager, against the nervousness of the record label, he put his faith in this strange, sad song. It was one of the first major artistic battles he had with the Colonel, and it was a battle he won. The record was released in January 1956. At first, it seemed like the Colonel might be right, and radio stations were hesitant to play it. Listeners were confused. Where was the rockabilly kid they'd heard about? Who was this moody crooner? The RCA executives panicked. They called the producer in Nashville, Chet Atkins, and complained about the weird echo, asking if he knew what he was doing. Even Chet himself had disliked the song during the recording session, thinking it was a step in the wrong direction. The Colonel must have felt a grim sense of satisfaction. He had told them so. But then, something happened. The song started to connect, slowly at first and then all at once. People weren't just listening to it, they were feeling it. That strangeness, that darkness, that raw emotion that the Colonel saw as a commercial liability turned out to be its greatest strength. It was completely unique. It didn't sound like anything else on the radio. In a sea of cheerful pop, this song was an island of deep, authentic feeling. It was dramatic, it was intense, it was art, it cut through the noise, it made people stop what they were doing and listen. It showed that this young singer was more than just a handsome face with a great voice and shaking hips. He had depth. He had a soul. He could convey profound sadness as powerfully as he could convey wild joy. The song climbed the charts. It went to #1 on the pop charts. It went to #1 on the country charts. It even made the top 5 on the R&B charts. It was a monster. It sold millions of copies, becoming his first gold record. It was the single that launched him from a regional sensation into a national superstar. It proved the RCA investment was not just sound, it was the deal of the century. The Colonel was wrong, completely and utterly wrong. His business instincts, usually so sharp, had failed him. He saw the song as a risk that would alienate the audience, but the audience didn't want something safe. They wanted something real. They were tired of the squeaky clean pop songs. They were ready for something with guts and a little bit of gloom. The song didn't kill his career. It made it. It established him not just as a rocker, but as a true artist who could handle any kind of material and make it his own. The Colonel never admitted he was wrong, of course. That wasn't his style. Once the song was a certified smash hit, he acted as if he had known it all along. But for a few tense weeks in early 1956, the great showman was convinced he was watching his golden goose lay a rotten egg. He believed that this slow, sad, spooky song about a dark and lonely place would be the biggest mistake of Elvis Presley's career. The name of that song was Heartbreak Hotel.